I had been driving for a rideshare app for a little over a year, and at the time I usually worked night shifts to make some extra money. Cleveland is a quiet city after 10, but the later it gets, the stranger the passengers. That night, it was already past midnight when I accepted a ride just a few minutes away. Pickup point, a closed restaurant. Destination, an industrial area near the Cuyahoga River. The name on the app was Mark, no photo. Nothing unusual, but the emptiness around the pickup spot put me on edge. He appeared from the darkness without saying a word, opened the back door and got in. The sound of the seat sinking was the only noise. I asked if he was Mark, and he just said, yes, without looking up. His face was partially hidden by a hood and the shadow from the streetlight. I shifted into drive and followed the GPS. For the entire trip, he sat motionless, staring straight ahead, but not at the windshield. It was like he was staring at the back of the passenger seat. I tried to make small talk, but his silence was suffocating. The road to the industrial district was nearly empty, and the only sound was the wipers dragging across the glass. The GPS had me turn onto a side street, one of those long, straight stretches lined with shuttered warehouses and widely spaced light poles. The rain had eased, but the wet pavement still reflected the amber lights like a mirror. When the GPS announced, "You've arrived at your destination," I slowed down and looked into the rearview mirror. The man was still staring at the back of my seat, completely still. I waited a few seconds and said that we'd arrived. No reaction. I cleared my throat, nervous, and spoke louder. "Sir, this is the final stop." That's when he lifted his head for the first time. His eyes met mine in the mirror, and in a raspy, dragging voice he asked, "Have you been here before?" I gave a nervous laugh, said no, that I was just following the GPS, but he stayed silent, still staring. After about 10 seconds, he opened the door slowly and stepped out without closing it. He walked to the middle of the road, stopped beneath a streetlight, and stood there, his back to the car. I just wanted to leave, but for some reason I couldn't take my eyes off the mirror. He stood there so long that I started to think he'd frozen in place, like he was waiting for something. The street was completely empty, the soft patter of rain tapping on the roof. I turned on the hazard lights, glanced at him again, and called out, "Hey, you left the door open." No response. Then he turned his head slowly, not his body, just his head, enough for me to see his face in the yellow glow of the streetlight. He looked like he was smiling, but not naturally. It was strained, wrong. I hit the door lock, shifted into reverse, and started to back away. When I checked the mirror one last time, he was still standing there, but now fully turned toward me, watching as the car pulled away. A chill ran through me so hard I sped up without thinking. It wasn't until I reached the main avenue that I realized I'd forgotten to end the ride on the app. I pulled over in front of a closed store, took a deep breath, and completed the trip. The charge went through, but something caught my eye. The app still showed the passenger inside the car. Instinctively, I turned to look at the back seat. It was empty. The floor mat was wet, the seat belt stretched across, and that's when I noticed. The belt was still buckled, locked in place, as if he'd never gotten out. I stared at it for a few seconds, trying to think of a logical explanation. Maybe he got out too quickly. Maybe the buckle jammed. I unlatched it, and the fabric felt slightly taut, like there was still weight pressing against it. I decided to check the dashcam footage, which records both inside and outside the car. I scrubbed through to the moment he got out, and what I saw made my stomach drop. On the video, he really does open the door and step out, but the seatbelt stays down, pulled tight like no one ever left. Even stranger, after the door shuts, the reflection on the window shows the back seat, and a dark shape, perfectly still, sitting exactly where he had been. I paused the video and rewound a few seconds, thinking it was a lighting glitch or some reflection from the street. But the more I looked, the more it seemed like an actual silhouette. Solid, distinct, in the same exact spot. I played it forward again, and even as the car drove off and turned the corner, the shape stayed there, completely motionless. My breathing got shallow, my hands slick on the steering wheel. I got out and stood on the sidewalk, peering through the rear window. Nothing, just the empty seat and the streetlight's glow. When I got back in and rewound the footage one last time, the camera froze for a moment. The image locked on the man standing under the streetlight, watching me from afar. Then the recording skipped ahead a few seconds, and in the very last frame before it ended, something moved in the back seat, just for an instant, as if someone leaned forward toward the lens. Story 2. I remember that night clearly because I was just about to end my shift. It was past midnight and traffic in Salt Lake City was practically dead. The app pinged with a new ride. Pickup from a residential street on the outskirts, destination, St. Paul's Church. It was odd for someone to go to a church at that hour, but I accepted anyway. The passenger's name was Anna, and her profile photo was just a silhouette. When I arrived at the address, a woman was standing on the sidewalk beneath a flickering streetlight. She wore a long, dark coat and held a small purse. As soon as I stopped, she opened the back door and got in without saying a word. The car filled with the scent of wet rain and old perfume. I asked for confirmation of the destination, and she answered without hesitation, in a calm, almost emotionless voice. "To the church, please." I set the GPS and started driving, trying to make small talk, but she stayed silent, staring out the window, where all you could see were the reflections of headlights passing through the tree branches. The road toward the address was near the edge of the city, where paved streets turned to dirt and the streetlights grew sparse. As we drove, the sound of gravel under the tires was the only thing breaking the silence. She didn't move a muscle. Her coat covered most of her face and her damp hair clung to her neck. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, she was in the same position, facing forward, motionless, not even blinking. After about 15 minutes, the GPS said we were less than a kilometer away. I thought it was strange. The area was completely deserted. When the app announced, "You've arrived at your destination," I slowed down and saw what looked like an old church, surrounded by tall weeds and the remains of a fallen fence. The windows were shattered, the doors half torn off. The wooden boards on the facade creaked in the wind, producing a hollow sound that mixed with the hum of the engine. I looked into the mirror and asked, "Are you sure this is the place?" But the back seat was already empty. By reflex, I turned around, expecting to see her opening the door or walking toward the gate. But the car doors were all closed, and the air inside felt colder than before, as if someone had opened an invisible window. I stepped out, shining my phone's flashlight around. No footprints in the mud, no silhouette walking away, just the distant sound of something metallic tapping against the broken glass of the church. I walked up to the entrance and saw that the inside was completely empty. No pews, no altar, just debris and old dust. When I got back to the car, the app on the dashboard still showed the ride as active, but the passenger's name had vanished. In its place was a gray screen with the destination listed as undefined. I tried refreshing, but the system froze and closed by itself. That's when my stomach turned cold. In the rearview mirror, the back seat looked darker than the rest of the car, as if a shadow lingered there for a few seconds before fading away. I just sat there staring at the reflection until the chill forced me to start the engine and drive off. On the way back, the GPS no longer recognized the route I had taken. The streets looked different, like the lights and intersections had shifted. It took me almost 20 minutes to find the main road again. As soon as I merged onto the brightly lit avenue, the app restarted on its own, displaying the trip history. I scrolled to find the last ride, but it wasn't there. No record, no timestamp, nothing. The system showed as if I'd been parked for that entire half hour I spent driving the passenger. I pulled into a gas station to calm down, reclined the seat, closed my eyes for a few seconds. When I looked back at the rearview mirror, something made my chest tighten. The right side rear seatbelt was stretched out and buckled. I was sure it had been loose when I got back on the road. I unlatched it slowly, trying not to think too much, and noticed a small, dark thread stuck in the buckle. It looked like a piece of the coat she was wearing. The car radio crackled for a second, and a faint female voice whispered something that sounded like, "Thank you." Story 3. I never liked working night shifts, but business in Dallas picked up after 10. That night, around midnight, the app pinged with a short ride, pickup from a roadside hotel. The name was common, Eric, and the destination was a residential neighborhood about 15 minutes away. When I arrived, The hotel parking lot was nearly empty. The facade lights flickered and a figure emerged from the side of the building before I could even unlock the doors. The man got in quickly without looking at me. He wore an old jacket and smelled of gasoline mixed with sweat. As soon as the app confirmed the ride, I politely asked if the address was correct. He simply replied, "Yes." But the way he said it made my stomach tighten. His voice was firm, dry, completely certain, without hesitation. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the radio playing low in the background, some random late-night station. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke. "Your mother still lives in that house near Richardson, right? The one with the white fence." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. My heart jumped and I glanced at him in the rear-view mirror. He was staring out the window, calm, as if he'd just made small talk. I asked him what he'd said and he repeated it, word for word, same calm tone. "Your mother still lives in that house near Richardson with the white fence." My hands started to sweat on the steering wheel. I had never talked about my family with any passenger. I took a deep breath and asked if he knew someone in the area, trying to sound casual. He said, "I know you." My stomach turned. I thought maybe he recognized me from social media or was a repeat customer, but the more he talked, the less sense it made. He began listing names, my sister's, my father's, even the name of our old dog from when I was a teenager. Every one of them was right. None of those names appeared anywhere on my driver profile. The air inside the car felt heavier, and for some reason the temperature began to drop. I checked the dashboard. The AC was off. Still, a cold draft slid down the back of my neck. I kept driving, but my thoughts were a blur. The hum of the engine sounded muffled, distant, like I was underwater. I looked in the mirror and asked who he was, trying to sound steady. He turned his gaze from the window to the mirror, expressionless. "You should lock your gate better," he said, like he was giving me friendly advice. My blood ran cold. I had left the gate slightly open that morning, but there was no way he could have known that. I stopped at the next red light, the glow of the signal painting his face in a distorted red hue. He didn't blink. I told him his stop was coming up, but the GPS still showed more than 5 minutes left. Trying to keep my voice calm, I said I needed to refuel before finishing the ride. He didn't answer, just stared at me through the mirror. Every second felt like an hour, my throat dry, my pulse pounding in my ears. When the light turned green, I drove straight to the nearest gas station. I pulled up beside the convenience store under bright lights and visible security cameras. I turned to him and said as normally as I could, "The trip ends here, sir. System issue. I need to restart." He tilted his head slightly as if trying to understand. I stayed perfectly still until he opened the door and stepped out slowly, saying nothing. The way he moved unsettled me. Slow, stiff steps, like he knew I was watching. As soon as he was a few yards away, I locked the doors and ended the ride on the app. The trip completed screen appeared, but something made my skin crawl. The name Eric disappeared, and in the ride history, the passenger field was completely blank. I waited until he was gone and checked the mirror. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no movement. I started the engine and drove home without taking another fare. I kept telling myself he was just trying to scare me, that it was coincidence or some kind of scam. But the feeling of being watched stayed with me the whole way back. When I got home, it was nearly 2 in the morning. The street was deserted, the streetlights flickering occasionally as if something was interfering with the power. I parked and sat for a few seconds, staring at the gate. It was open, slightly. I swear I had closed it before leaving. I always do. I got out trembling and walked up to it. No signs of forced entry. The latch was turned inward. I stepped in slowly, my heart pounding. The yard was damp like it had just rained, but the sidewalk outside was dry. I opened the front door and immediately smelled wet earth mixed with something metallic and cold. The entryway light wouldn't turn on. I walked through the dark toward the kitchen switch and noticed the rug was wet, completely soaked, like someone had walked across it with dripping shoes. I called out for my mother, but she'd been traveling that week. Silence. Then I heard it, a faint creak from the hallway like wood bending under weight. I froze, listening, trying to locate it. I crept toward the sound. The floorboards groaned beneath me, echoing louder than usual, like the house was hollow. I flipped the hallway light on and saw wet footprints, large, masculine, leading from the rug toward the back door. They stopped abruptly in the middle of the floor, as if whoever left them had simply vanished. The air in the house felt thick, almost suffocating, and for a moment I could swear I heard that same slow breathing the man had inside the car. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but the screen flickered and went black. No signal. Then I noticed another sound, a steady dripping from the kitchen. When I went back, the soaked rug looked darker now, as if the water had mixed with something else. I took another step and felt a cold sensation rise through my feet. The floor felt freezing. And then, outside, the car radio turned on by itself. The same station that had been playing during the ride. The song came through faint and distorted, as if it were coming from underwater. I ran to the window and looked outside. The car's parking lights were on and the music was playing softly but steadily. It was a slow, repetitive melody, one I recognized instantly. The same song that had been playing when the man started talking about my family. Instinctively, I grabbed a flashlight and went into the yard. The air was completely still, and the music seemed to fade the closer I got to the car. When I reached it, I saw the passenger seat was reclined and soaked, as if someone had been sitting there. I turned off the radio, but the sound kept playing for a few more seconds after the dashboard lights went dark, echoing from somewhere that wasn't the car. I hurried back inside, locked every door and window, and sat on the couch, trying to breathe. That's when I noticed the living room rug was almost dry, as if it had never been wet at all. I looked around, and for a split second I swear I saw something reflected in the dark TV screen. A silhouette standing in the doorway, head slightly tilted, just like the man in the car. I blinked, and the reflection was gone. It was almost 1 a.m. when I took that stretch of Highway 64. I was returning from a long delivery run, and the shoulder was barely visible through the fine drizzle. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness in short beams, the wipers the only constant sound. That's when I saw him. A man standing at the edge of the road, wearing a dark rain-soaked jacket, his face turned directly toward the headlights. I slowed down instinctively. He raised one hand, waving slowly, but didn't signal for help. He just stood there, motionless, like he was waiting for me to stop. As I drew closer, he stepped forward and placed both hands on the passenger side window. His smile was wide, but his eyes, empty, fixed, unblinking. The sound of rain against the glass muffled everything else, and for a few seconds, I was frozen, mesmerized by that expression. I lowered the window just a few inches and with a trembling voice asked if he needed help. No answer. He stayed there, face pressed to the glass, smile unchanged, eyes locked on mine. There was something off about it. Not a plea for help, but not a threat either. It felt like recognition. Water ran down from his hood, dripping steadily to the ground in a rhythm that blended with the hum of the engine. I shifted into first and began to drive forward slowly, never taking my eyes off him. Even as the vehicle picked up speed, he didn't move. The smile stayed frozen, his hands still on the glass until the very last moment before he disappeared from view. Only when he vanished from the mirror did I realize I was shaking. I turned on the radio to break the silence, but every station was static. I glanced at the mirror one last time, and he was still there, standing in the exact same spot, facing the road, watching me drive away. The rest of the trip was swallowed by a heavy silence. I kept telling myself he was just a drifter, maybe drunk or lost, but I couldn't shake the way he'd smiled, like he knew me. Every pair of headlights I passed made me glance at the shoulder, half expecting to see another figure. But there was no one. When I reached the next town, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station to rest and tried to forget what I'd seen. A few hours later, as dawn was breaking, I had to take the same route back. The sun was barely up and fog covered the asphalt. I didn't want to drive through that stretch again, but it was the only way home. As I got closer, my heartbeat picked up, the memory of his face returning in full detail. I turned up the radio to drown out my nerves and kept my eyes on the center line. When the GPS marker hit the exact point where it happened, my stomach dropped. He was there. The same man, in the same spot. standing on the shoulder under the light rain that had started falling again. Story 4. That night in Tucson, the air was dry and heavy, typical of the desert after a hot day. I was already thinking about ending my shift when the app pinged with a ride just 2 blocks away. The destination was a gated community on the far north side of the city, an isolated area, surrounded by high walls and almost no lighting. The passenger's name was Daniel. The ride looked normal, and the profile showed an old account, usually a sign of a reliable person. When I pulled up, he was already waiting, tall, well-dressed, wearing a dark suit that looked completely out of place for the time and location. He opened the back door calmly, got in, and greeted me with a simple, "Good evening." His tone was polite, almost formal, with a faint accent I couldn't place. I asked to confirm the address, and he replied yes, to a place called La Paloma Ridge, Coyote Street, 172. The GPS calculated the route, about 20 minutes. The silence inside the car was so absolute that the sound of the tires on the asphalt seemed too loud. During the trip, I tried to make small talk, asked if he'd lived in Tucson long, if he was coming from work. But his answers were short, emotionless. Yes. Not long. Just a minute. Sometimes he'd glance out the window as if recognizing the road, but his eyes didn't follow anything specific. It was a blank, unfocused stare. When the GPS said 3 minutes to arrival, the road narrowed and the cell signal began to fade. The gate to the community appeared ahead, a tall structure with an unlit guard booth and a rusted, barely legible sign. I stopped and asked if he needed help opening it. He looked at me through the rearview mirror with that same blank expression and said only, "Wait here, I'll be back in a minute." Then he opened the door and stepped out calmly, walking toward the gate. The sound of his footsteps on gravel was the last thing I heard before silence swallowed everything. The car's headlights lit up the sign, but it was covered in rust and sand. I could barely make out the words La Paloma Ridge, closed for renovations since 2021. I waited the first 2 minutes calmly, thinking maybe he went to open a side gate or meet someone. By 5 minutes, I started getting uneasy. No movement, no sound. The road behind me was completely deserted and the only light came from the car's headlights. I checked the map, but the GPS showed my car in a blank gray zone. No street names, no roads. The ride was still active, timer running. After a few more minutes, I got out. I walked to the gate, shining my phone's flashlight over the ground. No fresh footprints, no sign anyone had passed through. The chains on the gate were rusted shut, sealed with old padlocks. I called his name aloud just to break the silence, but the only response was the faint echo of my own voice. I went back to the car with the uneasy feeling that someone was watching me. As soon as I got in, the app vibrated. The passenger's location blinked on the screen, but it wasn't outside the vehicle. The blue dot was inside my car. My heart started pounding. The location pulsed steadily, right over the car icon, as if the app thought the passenger was still sitting there, in the back seat. I turned slowly, lighting up the interior with my phone screen. The seat was empty, but the seatbelt was buckled, as if someone invisible was still strapped in. The air inside felt colder, not the kind of cold from outside, but the kind that seeps into your skin. I tried to end the ride, but the button didn't respond. Each tap made the screen flicker, only to return to the same pulsing blue dot inside the car. Sweat rolled down my temple, even with the AC off. I decided to start the engine and drive away. But the GPS updated by itself, showing the same destination again, Coyote 172. Same route. Same voice from the navigation system, now speaking in a lower tone. "You've arrived at your destination," even though I hadn't moved an inch. The digital voice echoed through the car, followed by a silence so thick it seemed to fill the space. Ben, the driver, turned off the app, but the phone screen stayed on, projecting the map with the blinking marker still inside the car. Then came a faint creak from the back seat. He whipped around, heart racing, and saw the seatbelt slowly swaying as if someone had just unbuckled it. On reflex, he started the car and sped off, driving as fast as he could back toward the city. In the rearview mirror, the lights of the community disappeared into the darkness, swallowed by the empty desert landscape. He drove for about 15 minutes before pulling into a 24-hour gas station. Still trembling, he ordered a coffee and tried to stop his body from shaking. When he checked the phone again, the app had finally closed the trip automatically, but the trip history showed something impossible. The ride had lasted 2 hours and 37 minutes, far longer than he remembered being there. When he returned to the car, the smell inside was different, damp like wet fabric mixed with dust. The rear window was fogged up, and when he wiped it with his hand, he froze. A palm print on the inside of the glass, as if someone had pressed their hand there while he was gone. The coffee nearly slipped from his hand. He sat behind the wheel, breathing hard, trying to convince himself it was just condensation from the rain. Before starting the engine, he glanced at the dashboard and froze again. The GPS had turned itself back on, even without a signal, showing the same location. Coyote 172. The number blinked on the screen, but now the destination was no longer listed as the gated community. The marker showed the car's current location, and below it, in small gray letters, appeared a message he had never seen before on the app. Passenger waiting. Story 5. I remember that rainy night in Portland clearly. Traffic had died down after 10, and I was already thinking about ending my shift when I got a request less than a kilometer away. The pickup spot was an old roadside motel, one of those single-row ones with a flickering neon sign and an almost empty parking lot. The name on the app was Marjorie. Destination: a house in the suburbs, about 20 minutes away. The rain was getting heavier when I arrived, the drops hitting the windshield hard and scattering the reflection of the streetlights. She was standing there on the sidewalk, wearing a brown coat so soaked it looked heavy. She carried a small bag and kept her arms tight against her body, as if shivering. She looked to be in her 40s, with dark hair tied back in a messy bun. As soon as I stopped, she opened the back door and got in without saying a word. The seat was instantly wet, and the air inside the car changed, a sudden, dense chill. I greeted her, asked if she was okay, and she whispered softly, "Yes, just take me home." The GPS plotted the route, and we drove in silence. The city seemed deserted, the wet streets reflecting red and green traffic lights. Every now and then, I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw her face faintly lit by the dashboard glow. Her gaze was fixed on her lap, hands clasped together, pale, motionless fingers. Her breathing was shallow and uneven, like she was holding back tears. I thought about asking if she was all right, but something about her demeanor made me stay quiet. That kind of silence that feels more dangerous than calm. As we left downtown, the rain eased and the sound of the tires on wet pavement became the only noise. At one point, she muttered something so softly I almost didn't catch it. "Can you wait until I'm inside, please?" I agreed immediately, thinking she was afraid to go in alone or worried about someone being there. I said, "Of course," trying to sound reassuring, and she only murmured a faint, "Thank you." There were just a few minutes left until the destination, but the air inside the car felt thick, time moving slower, the smell of dampness growing stronger. When the GPS announced we'd arrived, I stopped in front of a small house, no fence, on a quiet residential street. The clock on the dash read 1:43 a.m. The house was dark, only a single street lamp casting a weak light over the porch. The woman hesitated for several seconds before opening the door. I saw her shoulders tremble, like she was taking a deep breath to gather courage. She finally stepped out, adjusting her soaked brown coat, and walked slowly toward the porch steps. Each step seemed hesitant. When she reached the door, she just stood there. Still. I waited. 1 minute, then 2. She didn't move. The rain started again, lightly tapping on the car roof. I leaned forward a bit, trying to see better, but all I could make out was her outline, motionless, facing a door that never opened. After about 5 minutes, I started to get uneasy. I tapped the horn softly, just a short sound to get her attention. She didn't react. Watching through the mirror, I noticed her brown coat darkening further under the rain, clinging to her body. It was strange. Her posture was completely rigid, not a single movement of her head or hands. I looked around, searching for any lit window, any sign someone lived there, but the whole street seemed empty. I decided to send her a message through the app, asking if she needed help. The screen showed, "Message delivered, but not read." I waited a few more seconds, then stepped out of the car. When I shut the door, the sound echoed unnaturally, like there was nowhere for it to go. I walked halfway up the path and noticed something that made my chest tighten. She looked slightly closer to the door than before, though I hadn't seen her move. A cold wind cut across my face and a chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I called out from where I stood, "Ma'am, are you okay?" Nothing, not a sound. Just the monotonous patter of rain on the porch roof. I took a few more steps, but as my foot hit the curb, a sharp crack echoed. The woman turned her head suddenly, like responding to a command, and for a brief instant the streetlight revealed her face. Pale, expressionless, eyes wide open, staring straight at me. I stepped back. She didn't move, just turned her gaze back to the door. That's when I noticed something that froze me in place. There was no doorknob. The door was completely smooth, just a wooden panel nailed into the wall. Yet she stood there waiting. I slowly backed away, keeping my eyes on her until I was back inside the car with the doors locked. I drove off with shaking hands, but I couldn't stop glancing at the rearview mirror. She remained there motionless in front of that door with no handle, her brown coat clinging to her frame, her head slightly tilted, like someone waiting to be let in. I turned the corner as fast as I could and stopped a few blocks away to catch my breath. I grabbed my phone to end the ride, but the app froze. The trip still showed as in progress when the blue dot for the passenger was still there at the same address. After a few minutes, I decided to review the dashcam footage. In the video, I could clearly see the woman getting into the car, our brief conversation, and her stepping out in front of the house. But at the very end, something made my blood run cold. The woman never appeared leaving the car. The door opened on its own, the rain blew in and the back seat was empty. Yet the camera showed her brown coat fading away gradually, as if it were dissolving into thin air. I turned off the camera and stared at the rearview mirror for several long seconds, unsure what to think. The back seat was empty, but something still felt off. A faint damp smell of mold and old flowers lingered, the same scent I'd noticed when she entered the car. I grabbed my phone and took a picture of the seat, maybe on impulse, maybe to convince myself I was overreacting. In the image, there was a dark patch exactly where she had been sitting, like the imprint of a soaked body. The next day, I went back to the same place during daylight. The street looked normal, simple houses, a few dry trees. But where the house from the night before should have been, there was just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and scattered debris. I asked a neighbor sweeping her porch about it, and she said, "That house was torn down over 10 years ago, after a fire." I froze. I walked back to my car in silence and before leaving opened the app one last time. The ride was still open, and the blue passenger marker hadn't moved. It was still sitting exactly where no house existed anymore. That night I decided to delete the app and stop driving altogether. But before erasing everything, curiosity got the best of me. I opened my old recordings and noticed something strange. The file from that ride was labeled differently. The system listed it as scheduled ride 1:12 a.m. with a future date. As if it had been set to happen again. I stared at the screen for minutes, my heart pounding. I thought about deleting the video but hesitated. Then something happened that made me drop the phone immediately. The audio started playing on its own. Her voice, soft, whispering from the back seat. "Can you wait until I'm inside?" I ran outside and slept in the car parked on the street. Since that night, I've never accepted another nighttime ride. Even now, whenever I pass by an old motel or see someone waiting in the rain, I feel that same chill crawl up my neck. Sometimes I swear I can still see, in the rearview mirror, a folded brown coat lying across the back seat. Story 6. That night I was about to finish my shift when the app notified me of a nearby ride, just 2 blocks away. It was around 11:40 p.m. in Minneapolis, in a quiet area where light snow had just begun to fall. I accepted without thinking much about it. When I reached the location, the app suddenly updated and displayed the message, "Ride canceled." I found it odd, but left the engine running for a few seconds just to see if the passenger might still be around. That's when I saw a man standing on the sidewalk exactly where the marker had been. He looked like he was waiting for someone, wearing a dark coat and a cap pulled down low, almost covering his eyes. Even though the ride was canceled, he waved and started walking toward the car slowly. I shook my head and rolled the window down just enough to speak. "The ride got canceled, man. You'll have to request again." He didn't answer. He just stared at me for a moment and then said in a rough voice, "I've ridden with you before." I froze for a second. His face wasn't familiar, and I never forgot a passenger. Trying to keep calm, I replied quickly, "I think you're mistaken, man." But he stepped closer, close enough for me to see the fog of his breath against the glass. "No," he insisted. "It was you. Same car, same smell." That sent a chill down my spine. I turned on the wipers just to have something to do with my hands and told him I had to go. He gave a small, humorless smile and slowly backed away from the window. I shifted into drive and sped off, glancing in the rearview mirror as I pulled away. He stood there motionless, watching the car fade into the fog until he disappeared. When I parked on a busier street to catch my breath, I opened my ride history to check if anything strange appeared. Nothing. No ride from that address. No familiar names. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The pickup location was the same address as my old apartment, the one I'd moved out of almost 3 years ago. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. I hadn't driven through that area since moving out, and the app rarely sent me there. Curious and uneasy, I opened the canceled ride on the map again. The blue dot pulsed right over the building where I used to live on the same side of the street, almost directly across from the old parking spot I used to take. Curiosity got the better of common sense. I turned the car around and drove there. The block was deserted except for one dim hallway light glowing inside the building. The address matched perfectly. I parked across the street and just watched. For a brief moment, I swear I saw a shadow move behind the curtain of the ground floor window. My old apartment's window. My heart started racing. I knew that place was empty. The last tenant had moved out months ago, and a neighbor I'd bumped into at the grocery store said he left shortly after moving in, claiming something about the place didn't feel right. I sat in the car, engine running, trying to convince myself it was just the streetlight playing tricks. Then I heard a muffled sound, my phone vibrating. I looked down. The canceled ride had reappeared, now listed as in progress, and the passenger's name was mine. My own name, my profile picture. I froze. The status bar showed, "Passenger on board." Slowly, I looked at the rearview mirror, and for one split second, I saw something behind me. A dark silhouette, motionless, sitting where no one should be. I turned around fast, and the seat was empty. But the air in the car had changed. It felt heavy, dense, a cold that didn't come from the AC. I took a deep breath and tried to end the ride manually, but the button wouldn't respond. The app was frozen on the same screen. "Passenger on board." I closed it, turned off the car, restarted everything. Nothing changed. Then I heard it. 3 faint knocks on the rear window. Short, evenly spaced, like fingertips. The sound came from inside. I sat frozen, cold sweat running down my neck. Slowly, I tilted the mirror, and in the dim reflection, I saw something pale, like a face without features, behind the seat. I jumped out of the car, stumbling onto the sidewalk, my heart racing. When I turned back, the glass was spotless, clean and dry as if nothing had ever touched it. I stood outside for several minutes, breathing fast, trying to process what had just happened. The streets were silent, a light wind blowing snow across the pavement. The only sound was the hum of my idling engine. I finally gathered the courage to get back in, opening the driver's door carefully. Everything looked normal, except the app was still open, showing the final route of the ride. The destination point was flashing red. The address was my current apartment. I gripped the phone tightly, unsure what to do. I tried taking a screenshot, but the app froze again and closed by itself. When I looked back at the mirror, I swear I saw something move, a shadow darting across the street behind the car. I drove off and didn't stop for nearly half an hour. When I finally got home, I turned off the engine and noticed something on the back seat. The seatbelt was buckled. Since that night, I've never accepted rides near where I live. I deleted the history, the app, everything. But sometimes, late at night, my phone still vibrates with a new notification. Ride available 2 blocks away. And the passenger's name always flashes on the screen. Mine. Story 7. It was a rainy night in Baltimore. The kind where the streets feel dead and your headlights barely cut through the curtain of water. I was on my last ride of the night when the app pinged, asking for a short trip, maybe 15 minutes. I pulled up to the address, and before I could say anything, the passenger opened the door and got in, the front seat. That threw me off right away. People almost always sit in the back, but he just climbed into the passenger seat silent. He was wearing a thick, soaked coat, and his hair clung to his forehead. He stared straight ahead at the windshield as the rain streamed down the glass. I asked his name to confirm the ride, and he replied in a calm, slightly drawn-out tone, like someone repeating something rehearsed. "Yeah, that's me." I started driving, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. The GPS said the destination was a residential neighborhood about 20 minutes away. The sound of rain on the roof was steady, and the wipers creaked in rhythm. The man never took his eyes off the road ahead, as if he were watching something invisible on the highway. I tried making small talk, asked if the weather was getting worse, if he lived nearby, but he didn't respond. He just shook his head slowly. After a few minutes, the silence grew heavy. Then he finally spoke, and what he said made my hands freeze on the wheel. "You know, where you're really going?" I glanced at him, unsure what he meant. His voice was calm, but there was something off about it, like he was speaking through a restrained smile. I forced a nervous laugh and said, "Well, I'm going where you told me to, right?" He turned his face toward me, still expressionless, and replied simply, "That's not where I told you to go." I pretended not to hear him. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I kept my eyes locked on the wet road ahead. He went silent again for a few seconds, then gave a low, almost whispered chuckle and said, "You should pay more attention to the back seat." The sound of the wipers seemed to vanish, leaving only the rain. I didn't want to look, but the rearview mirror was right in front of me. It reflected part of the interior. There was a shadow on the back seat. Still, my body froze. My stomach turned, my heart racing, but I couldn't move. I managed to say, "Sir, please fasten your seatbelt. We're almost there." He didn't respond. I drove until we reached the address, a narrow street with almost no lights. I stopped the car, turned slowly to tell him we'd arrived, and the seat beside me was empty. The only sound was the rain, and the passenger seatbelt still fastened. For a few seconds, I just sat there staring at the empty seat. The buckle still swayed slightly as if someone had just stepped out. I turned toward the back. Nothing. I grabbed my phone to check the app. The ride still showed as in progress, but the passenger's status was on board. His name was gone, replaced by a blank space. I tried to laugh it off, maybe a glitch, maybe some prank, but the tension wouldn't fade. When I looked at the mirror again, I saw something that stole the air from my lungs. The passenger window was fogged from the inside, and on the glass were finger marks, as if someone had pressed their hand there minutes before. I shut off the engine, stepped out into the rain to catch my breath. The water soaked through my clothes instantly, and the downpour was the only sound. I stood there for a moment, trying to think, but my mind was spinning. The air felt heavy, dense, as if something unseen was close by, watching. Trembling, I got back in, shut the door, and sat down. As soon as I did, the radio turned on by itself, hissing, white noise, static, crackling between bursts of silence. I reached to turn the volume down, but it grew louder on its own until a raspy, almost broken voice came through. "You should have let me go where I wanted." I dropped the wheel and opened the door, heart pounding. The rain was deafening, the noise swallowing everything. I looked around. The street was completely empty. When I closed the door and looked back at the dashboard, the app had finally updated, ending the ride on its own. On the screen, the final destination appeared in small letters: Baltimore Cemetery, Lot 41. Story 8. It was a Thursday night in St. Louis, and I was already thinking about ending my shift when the app notified me of a new ride. Pickup in a central neighborhood. Destination, Riverside Hospital. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't recall why. I accepted anyway. It was about 20 minutes from where I was. The city was nearly empty, a thin fog covering the streets, the pavement damp and the air colder than it should have been for that time of year. When I reached the pickup point, a man was already waiting under a streetlight. He wore a dark suit, neatly pressed though the cuffs were wet. He didn't wave, didn't move, just opened the back door and got in. The sound of damp fabric against the seat was the only noise. I greeted him and asked if he was the one who requested the ride. He simply replied, "Yes, take me to Riverside, use the back entrance, please." His voice was calm, polite, but there was something in it, something deliberate, as if each word were carefully measured. I started the car, and we drove in silence for several minutes. He stared out the window, his pale face lit by the yellowish streetlights. I tried making small talk, but he didn't seem to hear me. When I asked if he worked at the hospital, he answered without looking away from the road. "I worked there a long time ago." A chill ran down my spine, but I kept driving. The closer we got, the emptier the streets became. Narrower roads, older houses. Finally, the hospital appeared at the end of the avenue. A huge, dark building with broken windows and strips of caution tape flapping in the wind. I parked near a rusted gate and said we'd arrived. He leaned slightly forward, his eyes still fixed on the building, and spoke softly, almost mournfully. "No, not the front, the back entrance. That's where it all began." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. I circled the block, looking for another way in. The rear of the hospital looked even worse. The gate had collapsed, weeds covered half the sidewalk, and a broken sign swung by a single wire. I stopped the car and turned to tell him we were there, but the seat was empty. No sound of a door opening, no movement. The seatbelt was still fastened, the fabric of the seat slightly indented, as if someone had just been sitting there. I looked around, confused. The doors were locked and I hadn't heard anything. I stepped out into the drizzle and scanned the area. The faint rain had picked up, and the wind made the yellow tape slap against the gate in a hollow rhythm. I called out to him, but my voice was swallowed by the echo of the empty place. When I returned to the car, I instinctively checked the rear-view mirror. The back seat looked dry now, no sign of the damp suit. I sat there for a moment, trying to make sense of it. I pulled out my phone to check the app, thinking maybe he had canceled the ride without me noticing, but no. It still showed as in progress, the passenger's name blanked out, as if deleted. The timer kept running and the location was pinned to a single spot. Riverside Hospital, service area. The fear started to sink in. Before leaving, I decided to review the dashcam footage. I scrubbed through to the moment he entered the car. The door opens, the seat dips slightly, and I can be heard saying, "Good evening, are you my passenger?" But the door never closes. It stays half open the whole time, yet the car moves as if everything were normal. Me talking, driving as though someone were there. And in the side window's reflection, there's the faint outline of a face, blurred like the camera couldn't focus on it properly. When I paused the video, every hair on my body stood on end. I slammed the laptop shut and glanced at the rearview mirror. For a moment, I swear I saw something dark moving outside, between the car and the hospital gate. A tall shape, in a suit. I started the engine and drove away as fast as I could, not daring to look back. The next morning, I decided to look up the hospital. It had been closed 26 years ago after a fire that started in the back wing, the administrative offices, where the director's office once was. The name of the director who died in that fire? The same name that appeared in the ride log from the night before. Story 9. It was almost 2 a.m. in Boise, Idaho, and I was finishing my shift. The last request of the night came from an almost empty parking lot behind a small strip mall. The place was poorly lit, with only a few old cars sitting there covered in dust. I stopped with the hazard lights on and waited. After about 30 seconds, a man appeared out of nowhere. He stepped out from behind a rusty pickup truck, walking slowly, hands in his pockets. He got into the back seat without saying a word, his face half hidden in the shadows. I glanced at the mirror and asked for his destination. He replied in a rough, tired voice like someone who'd been smoking all night. "You know where I'm going?" I thought I'd misheard him. I gave a nervous laugh, asked again, and he repeated the exact same sentence, flat and emotionless. When I finally looked at the app, I noticed the destination field was blank. It showed an active route but no final address. I tried confirming it, but he simply added, "I knew you'd come back here." The way he said it made my whole body tense. Come back here? I had never been to that parking lot before. At least, not that I could remember. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he mistook me for another driver, or maybe he meant it figuratively. Still, my heart was pounding, and the air inside the car felt heavier. I turned on the radio to break the silence, but it was nothing but static, like the signal had vanished. During the ride, he just stared out the window, completely still. The passing streetlights lit his face in quick flashes, and at times it looked like his features were shifting, the shadow stretching the corners of his mouth unnaturally. I kept my eyes on the road, forcing myself to stay calm. At some point, the GPS began recalculating the route on its own, 3 times, before the screen went completely black. The app froze. I told him I'd need to restart the system, but he only said, "No need, we're already here." I looked outside and realized we were in an abandoned industrial area, just a few miles from where the pickup had started. No lights, no open buildings, just warehouses and light rain hitting the asphalt. I didn't remember driving there. It was like I'd lost several minutes of the trip. Acting on instinct, I parked and asked, "Here where?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His skin looked pale under the faint dashboard light. "Same place as before." I didn't understand what he meant. I glanced at the app. Now it showed the same parking lot we'd started from as the destination. I thought it was a glitch, but my blood ran cold when he added, "You dropped me off there last time too." I tried to laugh, but no sound came out. "Look, man, I think you're confusing me with someone else," I muttered, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer, just kept staring at me, his gaze empty and fixed. The silence grew so dense that I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then slowly he tilted his head to the side and whispered, almost inaudibly, "Did you hear me knocking on the glass that time?" A chill ran up my spine. "What glass?" I asked, but he only shifted his eyes to the rearview mirror, as if someone else were sitting behind him. The air inside the car turned icy, and instinctively, I looked too. The back seat was empty, but the rear window was completely fogged from the inside, as if someone had just exhaled against it. I gripped the wheel hard, trying to hide my panic. I told him I'd drop him there and end the ride. He didn't react. From the corner of my eye, I could see him staring at the dashboard, as if waiting for something. I shifted into gear and drove back toward the city. When I looked at the mirror again, the seat was empty. No door sound, no movement, and only the seatbelt swinging slowly, like someone had just gotten out. I pulled over to the side of the road, took a deep breath, and checked the app. The ride was still marked as in progress, but the map now showed the car parked at the same lot where I'd picked him up, even though I was miles away. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before noticing another detail. The blue marker didn't just show the car's position. There was a second gray dot labeled passenger, and it was inside the car, on the back seat. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my head. I looked slowly into the mirror, and for a split second, I swear I saw something. A dark figure, motionless, sitting right in the middle of the back seat. Broad shoulders, head slightly tilted. I whipped around. The seat was empty. No sound, no movement. But the air inside the car smelled different. A damp, metallic scent, the same one I'd noticed when he first got in. I shut off the app, turned off my phone, and sat there for a few minutes trying to figure out if I was losing my mind. When I finally made it home, still shaking, I checked the ride history. There was nothing. No record, no name, no timestamp. Just one strange notification. Ride completed, 0213, final location, Riverside parking lot. The problem is that was the same parking lot from the night before. The same place I'd seen him for the first time. Story 10. It was almost 1 in the morning when I hit that stretch of Highway 64. I was returning from a long delivery run, and the shoulder of the road was nearly invisible under the thin drizzle. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness in short beams, and the rhythmic squeak of the wipers was the only constant sound. That's when I saw him. A man standing on the side of the road wearing a soaked dark jacket, his face turned directly toward the headlights. I instinctively slowed down. He raised one hand, waving slowly, but didn't signal for help. He just stood there, motionless, as if waiting for me to stop. As the truck got closer, he took a single step forward and placed both hands on the passenger side window. His smile was wide, but his eyes, empty, fixed, unblinking. The sound of rain hitting the glass drowned everything else out, and for a few seconds I was hypnotized by that frozen grin. I rolled the window down just a few inches and with a trembling voice asked if he needed help. No answer. He stayed there, face pressed against the glass, smile unchanged, eyes locked on me. There was something deeply wrong in his expression. It wasn't a plea for help, but it wasn't a threat either. It felt like he recognized me. Water dripped from his hood, falling slowly to the ground, each drop landing in sync with the ticking of the engine. I shifted into first gear and started to accelerate slowly, without taking my eyes off him. Even as the truck picked up speed, he didn't move. The smile stayed, his hand still on the window until the very last second before vanishing in the rearview mirror. Only when I lost sight of him did I realize I was shaking. I turned on the radio to break the silence, but every station was just static. I glanced one last time at the mirror, and he was still there, standing in the same spot on the road, facing the truck, watching me drive away. The rest of the drive was painfully quiet. I kept trying to convince myself he was just a drifter, drunk, lost, maybe crazy. But something about that stillness wouldn't leave my mind. The way he smiled, like he knew who I was. Every set of headlights I passed made me check the shoulder again, half expecting to see another figure. But there was no one else. When I finally reached the next town, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station to rest and tried to forget the whole thing. A few hours later, just after sunrise, I had to head back the same way. The sun hadn't fully risen yet and fog blanketed the asphalt. I didn't want to drive through that stretch again, but it was the only route available. As I got closer, my heartbeat quickened, and the memory of his expression came flooding back. I turned up the radio to drown out the fear and kept my eyes locked on the center line of the road. When the GPS marker showed the exact spot of the first encounter, my stomach dropped. He was there. The same man in the same position, standing on the shoulder under the light rain that had started again. His dark jacket clung to his body, his face turned toward the road, as if he hadn't moved an inch since the night before. I slowed down without meaning to, eyes fixed on him. It couldn't be a coincidence. The headlights hit him squarely and the smile appeared again. Identical, frozen. His hands hung at his sides, but what made my blood run cold was the detail I noticed as I passed him. His clothes were dry. I looked into the rearview mirror and saw him again, placing his hands on the side window, even though the truck was already more than 20 meters away. It was as if he was always there, repeating the same gesture, no matter the time of day. I hit the gas, pushing the truck as fast as it would go, and didn't slow down until I saw the lights of a gas station ahead. I pulled in, trying to steady my breathing, and told the attendant what I'd seen. He just gave me a strange look and said, "You must be tired. Nobody goes down that road anymore, not after the landslide 2 years ago."
I'm really grateful for staying until the last minute. It's always good to know that you're here, listening to every detail. If you liked it, comment which part was the scariest for you. And of course, sign up to keep listening to stories as dark as this one. See you in the next video.